I pulled a gun on him because he's advancing on me.
Is he breathing?
He just fell out.
Welcome back to the Mountain Man Medical YouTube channel. Let's talk about this story next. All right, guys, thanks for checking out this video. Do me a huge favor before we get started. Go down below, hit that like and subscribe button. That's a free way to support me here at the channel. All right, let's get into it. This story happened on January 25th of this year in Williamsburg, Virginia. 911 dispatchers received a call from a distraught man who identified himself as a James City County police officer. He said he had just intentionally shot one of his fellow officers. The reason he gave the dispatcher for shooting his fellow officer was that the officer was advancing on him aggressively, and Rusk was worried that he was going to be raped. In the 911 recording, Officer Rusk is clearly distraught that he has just shot and severely wounded his fellow officer. He is very worried and repeatedly says over and over again that he's trying to save the officer's life. Officer Christopher Gibson was wounded 3 times from the gunfire from Rusk. He was wounded in a graze to his cheek, to his shoulder, and then also received a gunshot wound to his abdomen. It's kind of unclear in the audio when you listen to the 911 recording of the call, but Rusk appears, or at least sounds to say that Officer Gibson's guts are coming out.
He just fell out.
And that, to me, would make a lot of sense. I've worked around quite a few number of eviscerations, and it would seem likely that that bullet wound may have opened up a very large wound in Officer Gibson's abdomen and caused his intestines to become exposed. That would also kind of account for part of the reason why Rusk might be so animated and so distraught. Officer Rusk is very concerned that he has killed his fellow officer, and there's a good chance that he sees those exposed intestines from that open wound and thinks the worst. And of course, that's not a good thing at all. Obviously, we need our intestines on the inside of us. We want to know that that's not necessarily a life-threatening wound. The intestines being on the outside of the abdomen isn't going to kill us. It's the bleeding that's going to kill us. So we want to make sure that if we are ever working on an evisceration, which happens a lot more often than you might think, if we're ever working on an evisceration, we want to make sure we keep in mind the evisceration looks horrible, but our main concern is bleeding control. Don't let you get stuck up on this really horrifying looking wound and getting fixated on that, and the person is quietly bleeding to death. We want to make sure that we're still following the March algorithm here. We want to start at the top with massive bleeding and then work our way down. Once we get all the bleeding controlled, then we can come back and address that evisceration. And we can do a video on that in the future if that's something that you want. While Rusk was considered to be the aggressor in this particular situation and Gibson was taken to the hospital to be treated for his wounds, investigation by local news media reveals testimony from his family members that state that Rusk had been approached sexually by Gibson multiple occasions, and Rusk had turned down those advances on those multiple occasions. However, they were seen on surveillance footage in Paul's Deli having a lot of drinks and clearly spending time together. But then we also see that Rusk also turns down more advances from Gibson, who appears to be getting a little more aggressive with his intentions. I'm not really sure what's going on with this case at the moment. I wasn't able to find any more information about new material that's going on, but Rusk's lawyers did say that they think they have a very good self-defense case, and that if their client was a female, this would be a much different conversation than we would be having now that it's a male who is arguing that he was worried about being raped by another officer. This is a crazy, interesting story. If you want to read more about it, head over to mountainmanmedical.com and check out our blog posts where I've got more information and you can kind of read about that. There's something I really wanted to highlight in this particular situation. You might look at this as, how can we avoid this particular situation from occurring to us? But maybe this isn't occurring to us. Maybe this is occurring to someone in our area, and now their emergency becomes an emergency for us. A highly distraught man with a weapon who has just fired and injured somebody is a very bad situation for all bystanders in the area, right? So you might be out with your significant other, enjoying a night on the town, getting some dinner, and then all of a sudden this happens. How do you handle something like this? This is a very dangerous situation. You don't want to just draw your own weapon if you happen to have one and engage that threat, because you don't know what kind of a threat it is or who that officer is. That officer could identify himself as such. He could say, hey, I'm a police officer, but he could still be dangerous. We don't know what's going on. So how do we approach this situation? We need to be very, very careful in how we try to help, especially if we've got a trauma kit on us. Maybe we've got an ankle kit that we're wearing and we want to run up and provide all that help. Are we going to be able to do that safely? We want to make sure that we're keeping ourselves safe, or we're going to make the situation worse. So we always want to keep that in the back of our minds. What else can we do to make ourselves safer? Can we collect a team around us from other bystanders? Can we have them help us with this situation so that we're a little safer and our chances for success are much higher? The last thing I'll leave you here with is, what can we do about this situation medically? From the reported wounds that we have a graze to the cheek, a shoulder wound, and then an abdominal wound. The only thing that we can really do here is maybe wound pack the shoulder wound. There's obviously no arms or legs that are affected, so tourniquets will be ineffective at this particular point. I'll probably not be very concerned about the graze in the cheek. We'll probably throw a little bit of gauze on that and stem the bleeding after everything is all finalized and I've got the time. But the only other thing that we've got to really worry about is that abdominal wound, that potential evisceration, depending on what actually occurred there. Now, if we want to get into how to handle eviscerations, again, we'll go into that into a video at a later time. If that's something that you want, throw it down into the comments down below, and I'll put up a video on how to handle an evisceration. Otherwise, you want to make sure that you're going to wound pack that shoulder wound. That might be the only thing that you can really do. If it's located too far into the chest cavity, we don't want to pack anything into the chest cavity. The same as we don't want to pack anything into the abdominal cavity. There's just too much space inside of those cavities. You'll fill up that entire space with gauze and not actually ever get pressure down on that bleeding artery. And on top of that, you run the risk of getting in the way of the vital organs functioning correctly. So we want to make sure that we're always only wound packing junctions, which means our neck, our armpits, maybe in the shoulder area, and groin. Those are the places that we're going to wound pack. I might also wound pack an extremity wound if I've got the time and available resources, but that kind of depends on the situation itself. If you want to learn more about wound packing, head over to mountainmanmedical.com and check out our emergency trauma response course. It's totally free. It'll teach you tourniquets and wound packing and chest seals, which you might need to apply to that shoulder wound depending on where it is located. So always keep that in the back of your mind. Get those skills in your toolkit so that you know how to handle the situation when it pops off for you. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for hanging out and checking out this video. This is a crazy situation. Read more about it on the mountainmanmedical.com blog. Head over to mountainmanmedical.com and check out our Yellowstone and Wind River trauma kits. Be ready for whatever the mountain throws at you. I'll catch you guys in the next one.